The 22nd of Shvat, 1988, the passing of Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka Schneerson, wife of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, marked the beginning of a new era cosmically. Now the world is ready for Mashiach. Having reached the final stage in the redemption process, we began hearing state secrets, innovations, to guide us through this conclusive period. On the 2nd of Nisan, less than 6 weeks later, the Rebbe discussed the expression of Yechi HaMelech, the statement of acceptance and coronation of the Davidic king, explaining that it both gives life to the king and causes the resurrection. Our action impacts the king and gives him his ability to rule. Then, in 1991, for 3 Shabbosim in a row, the Lubavitcher Rebbe clarified our role in this critical time, what we must do to bring Mashiach now. Shabbos Parshas Vayera, the Rebbe stated that all the work to bring Mashiach is done. We are standing ready to accept Mashiach. Now, we have not only the existence of Mashiach, but also the revelation of Mashiach. We need only accept him. In actuality, he is here, he is revealed, and we need to accept him. That is the remaining work. The following week, Shabbos Parshas Chayei, the Rebbe disclosed more details. We are on the threshold of redemption. Mashiach has already successfully fulfilled all of the criterion of Maimonides, including fighting God's wars. All missions have been accomplished. The only thing remaining is for us to accept Mashiach. This will enable him to do his mission and redeem the world from exile. Everyone must infuse all he does with acceptance of Mashiach. We must explain the concepts of redemption so everyone can accept him. Then, the following Shabbos, Parshas Toldos, the Rebbe explained even further, based on the Mishnah, all the days of your life to bring to the days of Mashiach. When King Mashiach is revealed, this brings to the days of Mashiach, as within his existence are all the details of the days of Mashiach. Metaphorically, the Rebbe compares this to the air of Mashiach versus the light of Mashiach. Air of Mashiach symbolizes his existence, while light of Mashiach represents his activities. Through acknowledging Mashiach's identity, Mashiach's activities will be revealed to all. The primary way to bring Mashiach is to reveal his existence, as all the details of the days of Mashiach will come as a result of the revelation of his existence. The Rebbe is establishing that we have an obligation to accept Mashiach in order for him to bring redemption. Let's explore traditional sources on this subject. Sefer Chinuch questions the commandment of appointing a king. How can we have a command when a command necessitates action? What action is there? God already chose David and his successors forever. His answer? The Jewish people need to establish the sovereignty of the house of David. The prophet Hosea promises the redemption will occur when the Jewish people gather and appoint on themselves one head, the leader from the house of David. And the Malbim explains that as the process of redemption, the Jewish people will appoint the Davidic leader of that generation as their king. The Rebbe already alluded to this in 1991, Shabbos Mishpatim. The appointment of the Mashiach already was. All that is needed is the complete bonding between the king and the people. That was in 1991, 28 years ago. Maimonides establishes that we need to accept the Mashiach of our times. But why is the process in this fashion? Why is it coming through us and not directly from God? David's sovereignty is within every fitting male descendant. When Mashiach will emerge, his kingship is already intact. It is David's kingship that has continued and is expressing itself through him. David's appointment is expressed in every one of his descendants. Seemingly, we are appointing the king who was already appointed some 3,000 years ago. If we look into David's journey to the monarchy, we will understand. We will actually see the same process. David was anointed by the prophet Samuel through God's direct command. Maimonides rules that from the moment of his anointment, David merited to the crown of sovereignty. But he didn't immediately become king. Even after the passing of the then King Saul, David still did not become king. He needed an additional anointment by the people. First, the people of the tribe of Judah, where he initially led only his own tribe. And then, 7 years later, by the elders of the entire nation, to become ruler of the Jewish people. The people acknowledged David after the chief general of Saul, Abner, pledged allegiance to David and committed to go to the people and bring them to accept David as king. We see in the verses of Samuel the discussion of Abner with David concerning this plan, David's agreement, and Abner's fulfillment of his self-appointed mission. David, anointed by the prophet from the direct word of God, needs a campaign manager and an election platform. Abner even stated that just like God promised David, so I will do to him. Mitsudis explains, just like God promised to make him king over all the Jews, so I will help David with this issue of the sovereignty. God promised. He needs Abner's help to fulfill. Yes, because the people needed to accept him. David didn't become king through divine wonders. Only through Abner's efforts did the people decide they wanted David to be their king. Then the elders, representing all the Jews, said, "Behold, we are your bones and your flesh," expressing how fused the people desired to be with the king. The reasoning behind this seeming incongruous disparity, that God's words and the prophet's anointment didn't cause the kingship, but Abner's popular campaign did, is based on a principle of our sages. There is no king without a people. A king only exists by virtue of people believing in him as such. David was anointed 3 times by the prophet Samuel, by the tribe of Judah, and by the elders of the Jewish people. According to Jewish law, it's forbidden to anoint a king with a special anointing oil who has already been so anointed. Here, it was permissible, because the first 2 times didn't make him king, as he didn't have the popular acceptance of the people. He only became king with the people's coronation. Solomon also had 2 anointments, because the first time was exclusively with the people of Jerusalem. To be king, he needed the entire Jewish people, and that is what happened by the second anointment. In both of these cases, the people's acceptance is creating a legal situation that did not exist previously. This entire example with David is powerful and relevant, but even more so when we recognize how Mashiach and David are so intertwined. All aspects of David are a microcosm of King Mashiach. This is the reason Maimonides, in writing the laws of Mashiach, quotes verses containing 2 phrases. In each, the first phrase refers to David, and the second to Mashiach. By David in a small way, by Mashiach in a complete fashion. David's inability to rule until the people's acceptance of him, despite being chosen by God, is a powerful message to us
about our need to accept Mashiach now, to enable him to redeem the Jewish people and the entire world.
Mashiach already has the crown of sovereignty given to David when he was anointed by the prophet Samuel. Mashiach has the appointment to kingship, which David received when he was anointed by the Jewish people. But to reveal his sovereignty in actuality, Mashiach needs the acceptance of the people of that generation. We could question, once David did receive appointment by the Jewish people, why do his successors need further acceptance by the people of each generation?
We see historically it's a necessary component, creating a critical juncture in the line of the Davidic kings. Queen Athaliah tried to wipe out every descendant of David, to destroy his line and become the sole ruler of the Jews without any fear of competition. She almost achieved her diabolical desire, but there was one child, a year-old baby, Yoash, that was hidden from her murderers. Athaliah's brother-in-law, the high priest Jehoiada, smuggled Yoash and his nursemaid into the temple, and for 6 years, Yoash was hidden with his nursemaid in the attic area of the Holy of Holies.
When Yoash was a 7-year-old child, Jehoiada made a covenant with the high officers that they would do whatever to restore Yoash's reign. And then they all declared together, Yechi HaMelech, long live the king. Why? Jehoiada knew that an action was needed to express their nullification to Yoash's rule. Though this 7-year-old child was innately king, as the heir of David's line, and he's referred to in the verses as king, because he was the king before anyone even knew of his existence. But for his kingship to be actualized, he needed the people's nullification to him. Yechi HaMelech was a traditional expression of the people's nullification to the king's rule. Therefore, Jehoiada and the officers proclaimed this to 7-year-old Yoash to actualize his rulership by their formal acceptance of it.
Similarly with Solomon, David declared that Solomon would be his successor. Then David said that the people should proclaim, "Long live the king," to Solomon.
This act of acceptance by the people made Solomon the king in actuality. David's statement was not enough. In the commandment of the appointment of the king, there are 2 dimensions. The first is the appointment the first time of God's king, as happened to David when the elders of the Jews accepted him as king over the Jewish people. The second aspect is the future generation's acceptance of the sovereignty of David's descendants. Most significantly, we see this with Mashiach himself. Since the completion of his kingship is through the people accepting his authority, Rabbi Akiva proclaimed before Bar Kokhba, he is the King Mashiach. He realized Bar Kokhba fulfilled the criterion of Mashiach. Rabbi Akiva's proclamation impacted the process of revelation. Based on this, when we identify a leader from the line of David who has all the attributes of Mashiach, we too should acknowledge him. As the nation identifies the Davidic king and accepts his authority, this is the beginning of his revelation from a legal perspective. Thus, Maimonides describes for us the criterion by which we can identify Mashiach. Criterion are only needed before the official reign. Then we need them to determine the man who is the Mashiach, to fulfill our commandment of appointing the king.
When we identify the person who fulfills all the criterion, we know the time has come for us to accept his sovereignty. This explains why Maimonides, in his magnum opus dedicated exclusively to law, enumerated the criterion of Mashiach. The criterion have legal status because of our Torah obligation to identify Mashiach by these signs. In the Yalkut Shimoni, it explains that exile began with the rejection of the Davidic reign, and this will be rectified by the restoration of the Davidic reign at the beginning of the redemption. When the nation identifies, reveals, and requests the revelation of Mashiach, fulfilling the prophecy of Hosea, and they will seek David their king, this is the beginning that allows the ultimate revelation with the redemption. Concerning this verse of Hosea, and they will seek God and David their king, Mitsudos explains, the people will seek King Mashiach, who comes from the seed of David, and from him they will seek their request that he should rule them. The people will seek Mashiach and ask him to rule. This is critical in the process of the revelation of Mashiach. Beyond the legal ramifications, the historical aspect, and the prophecies that express this process, the concept of the Jewish people accepting Mashiach to enable him to rule is an expression of a deep Kabbalistic truth. There is no king without a people. We allow God's sovereignty on the world by our coronation of him. The sages say in the Talmud Rosh Hashanah, God requests, say before me verses of Malchios, sovereignty, to coronate me upon you, Kabbalistically, as explained by Reb Chaim Vital in the Priyetz Chaim, in the name of the Arizal. The dimension of Malchus, sovereignty, has nothing of its own. Constructing it is only through the acceptance of its authority by creation. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, God's desire for creation retreats. Then, with the blasts of the shofar and prayers of Rosh Hashanah, expressing our self-nullification to him and his reign, God once again accepts our coronation and rules this world. The kingship of this world is like the kingship of heaven. Therefore, we see this pattern by the kingdoms of David and Mashiach. Both in the Talmud Sanhedrin and in the Zohar, David and Mashiach are referred to as Barnapli, miscarriage, in a fallen state. Establishing the kingdom of Mashiach from its fallen state occurs when the Jewish people accept his sovereignty, causing his rule to be revealed. Kings on this world reflect God's kingship. The third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, in a foundational discourse entitled The Commandment of Appointing a King, explores the need for a king. Since we don't have the ability to be completely nullified to God, we need to connect to the person who is truly nullified. At the same time, this selfless person needs to be fitting as king over the people, nullified to God and ruling with God's power over the people and connecting them to God. This is a human we can relate to, who's completely fused with God and can help us come closer. We need a human king. As for us, God is an abstract reality. When we accept this human as God's representative, we can nullify ourselves to him and through him connect to God himself. The human king is a representative of God's sovereignty. Since God's system is that we need to arouse his will to reign, the same is with the human king. For him as well, there is no king without a people. Therefore, our acceptance
of the king's reign is as critical for his sovereignty as is our acceptance of God's reign every Rosh Hashanah. Additionally, Mashiach is one of the 5 comprehensive souls of old times, as explained by the Ramaz to the Zohar. There are 5 levels of soul, and there is one person who is the absolute embodiment of each level. David, Nefesh; Eliyahu, Ruach; Moshe, Neshama; Adam, Chaya; and the highest human embodying the highest level, Mashiach, Yechida. Every Jew has, at the core of each level of soul, a spark of the soul, of the comprehensive soul of that level. So, at the core of our highest level of soul, our Yechida, is a spark of the soul of Mashiach. When a Jew accepts the sovereignty of Mashiach, nullifies and connects to him, he is gifting Mashiach with the power of his spark. Through this process, Mashiach is receiving his life as Mashiach and the ability to reveal the absoluteness of his sovereignty. From all of the sources, we have seen one unifying message. We empower Mashiach. God has placed the key to redemption in our hands. He trusts us to use it. For the sake of every human on this planet, for the sake of every soul waiting above, for the sake of God longing for this world to be his home, accept Mashiach now.